While Israel continues its war, now closing in on a 1-year mark in the Gaza Strip against Hezbollah, against Hamas, while it now continues its new full-scale war into southern Lebanon, and while the world anxiously awaits to find out what Israel is going to do to Iran in retaliation for the 180 missiles that Iran used against Israel a couple of days ago, the big question on everybody's mind: what is the United States going to do? Are we going to get sucked into a war? And then, of course, what will Iran do when they receive this message here, or the missiles from Israel? So many things hinge on this. The reason why not just the world, but especially the region, the whole region is just on pins and needles on its edge, wondering, is this going to be the moment when finally regional war explodes and nobody can control what happens? These are very real concerns to have here. And I want to start off by looking at a comment last night that was asked by President Biden, what he thought about the possibility of this war escalating.
Mr. President, how confident are you that a full-out, all-out war can be averted in the Middle East?
How confident it's not going to rain? Look, I don't believe there's going to be an all-out war. I think we can avoid it, but there's a lot to do yet.
Will there be American troops sent to combat to help Israel?
Back to help Israel.
Will there be American troops sent to combat to help Israel? Yes or no?
We've already helped Israel. We continue to. We're going to protect Israel.
I play it a lot, so I won't bore you with it again. But man, how many times do you want to hear that soundbite of President Biden last April emphatically saying, we are the most powerful nation on the history of the planet, and then subsequently, we shape events, we make things happen. That's why we're the indispensable nation. And then when asked if the United States, not what Israel is going to do to Iran, but if the United States is going to participate, and does he see a wider war breaking out, he says, do you think it's going to rain? I mean, okay, let's be clear. You don't have any control at all over whether it will or won't rain. So that's just up to, the sky. That's up to the meteorological conditions, etc. That means that you're powerless. So when you want to use that language to say whether there's going to be a wider war, what you're telling everyone listening is, I don't know. I got no power. And then when asked specifically, is the fact that you have 2 aircraft carrier strike groups in the region, does that mean that you're going to use American combat power to help Israel attack Iran? And then he just got annoyed by the question and walked on. We're going to see some more examples of that here shortly. But this just should be a real alarming situation that every American should be really worried about. You have the president of the United States with all kinds of combat power in the region, right? There's just a part of it there. There's also the one where all the troops are on the ground, et cetera. And the question is, what are they going to do there? Why are they in the locations there? Why have an additional strike group been sent to the region? Are you planning on launching a large war? Because listen, this is the real problem. A lot of people see like that map, right? They see there's 2 aircraft carrier strike groups. They think about all the F-15s, F-16s, F-22s, whatever other kind of strike aircraft that could be on there, along with the missile carriers, the destroyers, etc. It sounds like a lot of firepower, and truly it is, for a short period of time. You can't wage a war with that firepower. That's only for a response or defense, as the case may be. But you aren't going to fight a war, not a war with that kind of combat power. You need a lot more. And if the Russia-Ukraine war has taught us anything, that in the modern era, and by the way, you can even add Iraq and Afghanistan to that list as well, don't think that wars are going to be over quickly. Things are going to drag on a lot longer than you think. Israel has already shown that in the Gaza Strip, to where now closing in on a year, just days away now from the year anniversary of that attack, it's an open-ended deal, and no one knows when it's going to be over. Not even the Israelis know. There's no plan for it to be over. They don't have an attainable military objective that they can say they're working towards. They're just still fighting. Same situation with the Houthis in the Red Sea. We're just still fighting. No one has any idea how that's going to ever be over. Now Israel has put itself on a course in southern Lebanon that equally has no outcome. There's no attainable military objective that you can put any sort of timeline on. It's just an open-ended situation. And now, on top of all that, you're about to launch something else. Israel has painted itself into a corner, and it has to respond. Now, I can't imagine any scenario to where after these very brash comments from Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, Ambassador Dannon, all these things that have been said, their foreign minister, that somehow they're not going to respond now because they have put their credibility and reputation on the line. Everything has led up to this. And if I was a betting man, I would say that you can probably imagine something's going to hit Iran on October the 7th. I mean, what more fitting, prize, I guess, could the Israeli leadership give their people than to retaliate against the so-called head of the snake on the 1-year anniversary of the day they were hit with a terrorist attack here. And honestly, I mean, I couldn't even imagine that Israel would be this close to it and then strike, like, say, tonight, for example, which is practically possible because all the pieces are in place, so they could. But I mean, why would they, just like 3 days away from that date, why would they avoid that? So because it's possible then, if they do it before then, that an Iranian response could also come on October the 7th, and then that would actually hand a media victory to the other side. So I doubt that they'll do that. So I suspect probably Sunday night in the United States, our time, in the early morning hours of 7 October local, that's probably when you're going to see something. It could possibly even time to the exact time when that terrorist attack happened in 2023, that the Israelis could choose that moment actually to launch. We'll see how it plays out. But no matter how it plays out, it's going to play out. And to show you how serious the United States is about this and how much they actually are worried about it, here's Matt Miller being asked yesterday about kind of a beneath the radar that we're actually helping American citizens get out of Lebanon.
We are working 24/7 to help provide U.S. citizens in Lebanon with as many options as possible to depart. We know that not all of them wish to leave, but our goal is to provide as many options as we can to make sure all of them are safe.
So that should tell you a lot right there, that we're actively 24/7, you heard him, working to get American citizens out of there. You heard Ambassador Freeman on this show yesterday say that the Russians have given instructions for all of their people to evacuate not just Lebanon, but Israel itself, and also from Syria, because they view that this is on the verge of something big blowing up. So they're trying to get their people out. I imagine probably other European countries. I have seen some reports that some other countries are also warning their people to get out as well. So everybody believes something big is coming. Now, at that same press conference that Matt Miller was talking about there, he was asked a really important question, because some of the possibilities of what Israel is going to do to Iran is strike maybe their oil infrastructure or their nuclear facilities, their nuclear program. Many people have been talking about that. Of course, you know that like the likes of John Bolton, Jack Keane, Lindsey Graham have been specifically arguing that that's exactly what they should go after for a long time. So one of the reporters asked Matt Miller, hey, what happens if they go after the nuke facilities? What happens next? And watch what doesn't happen next in this interview.
Does the U.S. believe that Israel striking nuclear sites would lead to a broader war?
So the president spoke to this yesterday, made clear that we do not believe they should strike nuclear sites. I don't want to deal with a hypothetical question beyond that.
I mean, it's not really a hypothetical.
It's an event that has not happened, so I don't want to.
It's a consequence of that.
It is an event that has not happened. I don't want to talk about potential outcomes.
Okay.
And listen, that's anything but a hypothetical question, something that's just theoretical that I don't know, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. This is something that's being actively talked about, and it is absolutely fair game to ask, if that happens, what will the United States do next? Regardless of what Biden wants. I mean, you saw him in that previous clip, and in a bunch since that we've also highlighted over the months. He is powerless on what Netanyahu does. Netanyahu will do what he wants to do. One of the sound bites we showed you yesterday showed Biden saying about what he doesn't want with the nuclear facilities to be hit, and then revealed that Netanyahu won't even talk to him. He hadn't even gotten on the phone with Netanyahu. So how much influence are you going to have there? See, it should be, and it used to be in the past, that American presidents would pick up the phone and tell the Israeli leader what they will and won't do when it comes to issues related to American national security. But instead, we give them $8.7 billion on one day, send an aircraft carrier strike group to join another one already in the region, and then we say what we hope they don't do. Well, of course, Netanyahu's going to do whatever he wants to do because he sees that the foundations are being laid to allow him to do that. Now, I have no idea whether Netanyahu will or won't hit nuclear facilities. I know they've talked about it in the past, and my guess is that he would not hit that first, that he would hit some other things, but he may, because he keeps talking over and over about it. And I think even in that United Nations speech, he said it was absolutely vital that they not have a nuclear program, and that sooner or later that Israel was going to do something about it. So this could be the sooner or it could be the later. I don't know. But either way, that would be a monumental situation, because, I mean, just on the surface of it, just on the physical consequences of it, you could have a nuclear catastrophe where nuclear material could be loosed out, and you have the equivalent of a dirty bomb blowing up there. And you know, that stuff gets in the atmosphere, it'll go wherever the wind blows. No one knows, you know, what the harm would be. And you could have a Chernobyl type, just ecological disaster. And I'm telling you, there's not a country on the planet that is not going to react very, very harshly if that happened on their soil. But there's also a lot of countries around the world that would react extremely warning. And I think that could be a trigger that would push many of them over the edge to saying, no, it is Israel that is the danger in the region, not Iran, you know, not the axis of resistance, etc. Because any country that's willing to intentionally cause a nuclear catastrophe on the ground is one that's going to scare a lot of regimes. And even in the Arabic world, there could be other regimes in the area that think, what if we're next? What if we get on their hit list there? Because if Israel goes from Palestine to Lebanon to Iran, who's to say that they may not be next? For example, Turkey is, and they've got very antagonistic relationships of late. And then Erdogan has made a lot of comments about Israel. What if he calculates maybe he'll be next? That could animate their thinking. More on that in a minute. But then now let's look at what a couple of Americans have been saying. So you had the one reporter who's worried, are you going to hit a nuke site, and what happens if you don't? But then there is some really helpful Americans, one former general and another former administration official, that says, hey, you know what, we can help you out. Here's General Kellogg saying, here's what I think is something they might consider.
There's two strategic targets in Iran that they can go after. One is the Supreme Leader Khamenei as a personal attack, and they've done that with Hamas. They did it with Hezbollah, taking them out. Or they can go after the nuclear facilities. And there's actually three of them. There's Isfahan, Natanz, Fordo. And in the ease of attacking, Isfahan's the closest one to Israel. Then you got Natanz, you got Fordo, which is near Tehran, harder to get to. They've already taken out air defense sites in the last time around Isfahan. If I was recommending to them, and I'm not, I would say go after both. I mean, you finally reached a point where enough is enough, and they need to go forward. You know, what's amazing to me is that we as a nation, we the United States, have repeatedly said we cannot allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And then when the Israelis get ready to go, we said, respond proportionally. Yeah. They need to clear the decks. They need to do something very strong on this, and I think they have an opportunity to do it in the near term. And do I think they will? Yeah.
So, yeah, just clear the decks. I mean, what is amazing about this to me is that a former general officer in the United States Army is actually making these kinds of statements oblivious to what comes next. I think this is more like an illness and a disease and a sickness that infects many of our elites, but especially our military officers who can see at the end of their nose, and that's about it. Here's an action you can take. We have the capacity to do it. Cool. Yeah, do that. Let's clear the decks. No concept of all of what the reaction would be. That we understand, he should understand that Iran has a considerable stockpile of ballistic missiles, that many of which are of the upper tier category of very effective, very big payloads, and very fast. And they can hit pinpoint targets, as they have physically demonstrated in recent years, even in Saudi Arabia. They can strike. But then you also have to look at what happens if there's a nuclear strike here, or if you go after the head of a state. I mean, going after Hezbollah, you can hide behind the thin veneer of saying, well, he was a terrorist. We called Nasrallah in Lebanon a terrorist, so we went after him, even though he was the political head of this entity. It's a non-state, sort of quasi-state actor in Lebanon, but still you can say, all right, well, that doesn't count. But you now go after the literal head of state of Iran, and you outright advocate for his assassination without any concern, like no problem. That somehow that there's not going to be a reaction to that. Oh, by the way, there's this thing called the Strait of Hormuz. Don't know if any of you generals have ever heard of it. It's kind of important. A significant portion of the global energy goes through this thing, and Iran has full control over it. They can mine the straits. They have a lot of speedboats and a lot of things. And even though they could be, significantly attrited by our naval capacity or our air power in the region, they can also deal a lot of trouble. And if they're willing to make some sacrifices, they can use those naval assets to destroy some of our ships in the region. They're not powerless. They have a lot of anti-ship cruise missiles and a lot of things here. We don't know how good our air ships anti-missile defenses are. They've never been tested in combat. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't work. Nothing is foolproof, so I imagine something would get through. If you go into an all-out war, then you can count on Iran doing everything. If they believe that their leaders are going to be assassinated, or that you're going to go after their heart and soul of their economics, which is their oil infrastructure or their nuclear facilities, then you have taken away any reason they have for restraint. And they have thus far shown a lot of restraint. But if you take those constraints off by literally trying to destroy the regime, then you give them every incentive in the world to go after targets they can hit, like all of those American bases we keep talking about in Syria and Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East, things that are within range. There's also been some reporting that privately, many of the Iranian leaders have been telling their regional counterparts, if you guys allow Iran to strike us and they hit our infrastructure, yours is next. We'll strike you even. Anyone who's antithetical to us will strike, possibly even Saudi Arabia. So it could literally turn this place into a sea of fire. And no concept of that in Kellogg's thoughts. He is literally talking like all we have to do is launch this, and then that's it, like game over, and there won't be a response. There's no threat to us in counter. And there is a real threat to that. But then there's another fella here named Rubin who wants to give his 2 cents on this, and he takes it just a wee bit further. Watch this.
If only 7 or 8 missiles get through, but those 7 or 8 have chemical, biological, or radiological warheads, then we're talking a whole different ballgame. I'm afraid now that this has happened twice, that the Israelis are going to be tempted to respond and respond hard. I think we're now in the last days of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
What would a hard response look like? Something aimed at the oil facilities, at the nuclear ones?
Well, if Israel were to strike at the nuclear facilities, their pilots aren't suicidal, so they might go in with surprise, but they're not going to be able to fly out with surprise. So first, they're going to need to take out command and control and anti-aircraft batteries. But I suspect they're going to do what the Israelis did with Ismail Haniyeh and Hassan Nasrallah. They're going to go for the head of the octopus, hoping then that the tentacles will wither away. I believe that what they're going to do is go after Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and the top leaders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to try to leave a vacuum at the top.
So now that's Michael Rubin. He's from the American Enterprise Institute. In case you don't know, that's a very hawkish organization. Lots of neocons go in and out from there to government. So it's almost like a breeding ground for neocons who love war. And he's singing right out of that neocon playbook, which is, first of all, to make you fear the Islamic Republic of Iran, that they are this hydra, this scary monster that's going to come after you. So he says, they could come after you with chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons. Holy cow, they could come and do that if any of those missiles get through. We've got to take them out before that. And I think that their regime is in its final throes. The end of the regime is coming. What message do you think that that's sending to the Iranians? We're actually going to find out here in just a second. We're going to see. But this is to show, this is mainly sent to an American audience, not even to the Iranian audience. He wants you to be afraid of Iran, to think, my God, we have to take them out. You heard Kellogg right before that saying, man, this is our opportunity. We keep saying that we can't let them have a nuke weapon. Here's your chance right now. Let's enable Israel to go and take them out right now. While we have the chance, let's do this. And again, we have to keep looking back at what is the expected response to this. What happens if this turns into an all-out war? Are we prepared for war? And let me just talk about it on the surface. As I hinted about a second ago, no. If you want to fight a war, you have to really be ready. You have to have a lot of things in place before. Look at what we did in World War II. There was years of preparation that went into that, because the leaders at that time either foresaw or wanted to, say, hey, we're going to have to get into this sooner or later, so let's start getting ready. And many years before, we started growing the military, we started training, we started putting new equipment in, we started applying new doctrines. We actually got rid of a bunch of old dinosaur generals and elevated some new ones and had some new thinking, etc. Had lots of time for large-scale maneuvers. One famous one with George Patton in Louisiana, for example, trying out the new armored doctrine, etc. And then, of course, industry started picking up. So before we actually entered, when Pearl Harbor happened in December 1941, we had a good system in place, and we could immediately launch. And it took upwards of 6 months before we were ready to actually engage in combat anywhere. In Desert Storm, which was my first combat action, Saddam Hussein invaded on August the 2nd, 1990 into Kuwait, and then we started a buildup. And so we spent 6 months or so to getting ready. We had this big assembly of foreign and allied nations. Had not 500,000 troops ended up going over there, one of which was the 2nd Armored Cav Regiment that I was in, came in Germany. We deployed to Saudi Arabia. It took a long time to ship the equipment, get it there, get it out. We spent time training and ready to go in. All kinds of supplies was going in. And then in January of 1991, we started launching it. And then by February, the ground incursion happened. All of that stuff took a lot of time, and we already had, because of the Cold War, a huge inventory and a much bigger defense industry capacity than we had now. At this point, we'd taken none of those actions at all. And just sending a few aircraft carrier strike groups can retaliate to something, can hit a strike, but it can't sustain war. And if you go in there, listen to me carefully. If you go in and you have a big strike and something like that gets hit in Iran, which is in its home turf, so of course it's ready to mobilize everything that it has, and they will literally physically mobilize troops if they need to continue to be able to fight. We can't do that. We can respond, but what do we do then if Iran actually retaliates and says, all right, now we're at war. That's it, fine, we're at war, the whole region's going to go up. And they start fighting a war, and we can't sustain it. Once that, just to understand, once that strike group has used all of its weapons, defensive or offensive, that's it. Now it has to sail back to its home port. It'd be weeks before you could get that. And we still have limited amount of stuff. I've told you many times before how we're robbing Peter to pay Paul already to give like air defense interceptors to Ukraine. We don't even have them for ourselves in Russia. I mean, in the NATO opposite Russia, we've only got 5% of what we need there. You got to see that we should be, when you talk again to President Biden and he says, hey, we'll see if it rains or not, but we'll decide whether, we're going to help Israel or not. He should be saying, okay, Netanyahu, I get it. You don't like Iran, but you better, whatever you do, better be real small, because listen, it ain't even matter what I want to do. I cannot support a full-on war here. We're not prepared for it. We don't have the capacity. We don't even have the inventory of stuff. If we had to fight unexpectedly anywhere in the world right now, we would be in a world of hurt. because we don't have the ammunition to sustain one on a long-term basis. And it would take years to ramp up the possibility with the infrastructure, to get the facilities built, factories, manned and staffed, and the equipment and the raw materials, everything. I mean, it would literally take years for that to happen. And we're flat-footed right now. So Biden should be telling Netanyahu, do not do this, do not escalate this beyond, because we won't be able to help you even if we want to. So don't start something we can't finish. Now, that doesn't seem to be Netanyahu's modus operandi, because he's already overcommitted his own country, because they also don't have the capacity to do what they've set out to do. So we'll see what happens, but that's where the leadership is supposed to come in here. But now let's look at the other part of this equation here. So that's what two American leaders have recommended that we do. We know that the Israeli side is looking at some of those things here. But what about the Iranian side? What about this Hydra, this monster that's looking to dominate the whole Middle East that we need to be terrified of? Well, earlier today, actually just hours ago, Ayatollah Khomeini, the leader of of Iran, the actual leader. They have a president, but he's the nominal lead. The actual head is Ayatollah Khomeini. He led the Friday prayers in Tehran earlier today. Something he hasn't done in years. That's not something he does. It's very, very rare that the leader himself actually gives these prayers, and he did today. So by itself, that was noteworthy. But I want you to see something else that was noteworthy, and that was about who even attended this thing. So you just had Kellogg and Rubin saying we should assassinate the leader. Israel has just assassinated one leader who, by the way, was a close personal friend of Ayatollah Khomeini. So given that threat and that danger, watch this.
So here, there is another message. One of the reasons that he has decided to go public and to lead the prayer, particularly this time, of course, is related with the recent developments. However, they say that now the Iranian authorities, from the top of the state to down, they want to send out a message to Israel that they are not hiding, they are not seeking shelters, they are not going underground. Because just remember, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, during his speech in the United Nations General Assembly, has said that there is no place in the Middle East that Israel will not be able to reach. And now the Iranians are coming up and challenging that. And they're saying that now we are here. You know our location? We all are here. And it's not only Ali Khamenei that is present today in Musalla Mosque. It's the president of the country, all the leaders, the heads of all the branches of the government, the top commanders, ministers, vice presidents, almost the whole state dignitary, the whole state hierarchy is now there and publicly in a location that is very well known.
So he sent a very strong moral message. You're talking about assassinating me. You just assassinated my friend and the guy that was our number one proxy in the entire region. Bring it on. I'm out here. He like taunted Netanyahu there. Don't miss this. He taunted Netanyahu by saying, everybody in my government, all of them here, one big target. You're going to try to take us out? I'm not hiding in the bunker. I'm right here out in the open, and I've gathered everyone together so you could take us all out if you can, if you're willing to try. So that was a really brash kind of move. And believe me, that's something that is recognized by the people. There's obviously, if you're tracking at all, you know that there's a lot of antagonism against the Iranian regime inside Iran. They've been having protests. They've been cracking down on people really throughout their existence. But in the last few years, there's constant threats to the regime. A lot of people don't like them. They actually hate them. They want to, to get rid of them and bring a new kind of government into operation, et cetera. But it's relatively contained. But right now, with the threat to the nation, and I've heard this from some Iranian contacts that I have that are very much opposed to the regime, have said that for the moment, this is kind of a rally around the flag deal. People are pulling together because despite Netanyahu's ham-fisted attempt to talk to the Iranian people and, hey, all this stuff that we've done in the past, we're for you. We want you to have a future. That's insulting, and it will have the opposite effect. It will push people toward the regime, not away from it. Now, some of the things that he said in the speech after he started speaking there was interesting, because while you had the Americans, trying to always cast Iran in the role of the demon and this wicked and evil regime and axis of evil and all that kind of stuff. Iran keeps producing before the world a regime that's actually stable, that's actually reasonable. So he started off, he's not fiery, he's not screaming, he's not doing all this stuff. He's very controlled and measured in his speech. And he says, listen, every nation has the right of self-defense. The Palestinian people have the right to defend themselves against this occupation. He said it's a human and a universal right that's in everyone's laws, that the right of self-defense. So he's being a very rational, very logical case. And then he says, hey, but we're not going to be passive on this. If we're attacked, he said, we have shown a very reasonable, proportional response to what has happened in the past. This missile attack the other day was in proportional response to what had happened to us. We say we're done. But if anything happens in the future, we are also going to take proportional response, saying that if Israel does something here in the near future, a response will come. And as we've seen from their Minister of Defense a couple of days ago, he expressly said it will be a very painful response concurrent with whatever Israel does. So if Israel strikes like the oil infrastructure or something to that effect, or God forbid if it should be a nuclear facility, you can expect something commensurate from the Iranian side. And then he did something that's really, really unusual and has been noted in a few Western media outlets already I've seen. But I want to highlight this because I think it's also another important aspect of this. In the midst of because he's Persian, remember, in the midst of their discussion, he switches over to Arabic. And then he's talking to the region at large. And he's saying, we're all in this together, folks. And he's now painting the Israeli side as the one that's irrational and that's actually a threat to the region. And so, as you know, there has been a big split for many centuries between the Shia and the Sunni sect of Islam. Well, now then he's reaching out to other Arabics, to Shia and Sunnis. And he's saying, hey, ultimately, we're all in this together and we need to pull together. And just like American actions over the last almost 3 years have been pushing Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran closer together militarily, now then our actions along with Israel are starting to bridge the Sunni-Shia gap. Now, it's always been, if you're just taking morality out of it, it's always been in America's geopolitical interest to keep that split alive and to keep them from coming together. Now then, we're starting to take actions that make them feel like they're all targets and that there is that the divide needs to go away and that, in common cause, they should come together. Now, I showed you a clip a few days back about the Arab League, the 57-member Arab League, and you saw how just frustrated the speaker of that speech was, where he's saying, hey, we all want peace. We all want to work with Israel. We all want to guarantee their security. But it has to come mutually. It has to be with the Palestinians and the Lebanese. They all have to have a chance to live in peace. And that's comparatively a low bar that says, hey, we'll guarantee your security. All the Arab nations in the region will. But if instead of taking that open hand, missiles fly out instead, and Israel continues on this to say, no, we're only going to use military force to compel and destroy everyone who is opposed to us, and then we'll have peace. That's not going to work. So we have to be very, very careful about going down a path that could actually bring together the whole Arab world. And if they start to see Israel and the United States not as friends to court, not as somebody to try and get on their side to their mutual benefit, but someone to fear, and that they may all wonder, are they going to be next? Then you may find them working together opposite us. We're not there yet. We don't need to be. But what happens in really these next few days could be very, very critical and instrumental to what happens next. And man, we need to always be paying attention to what happens next. And we rarely do. In the last thing here, I want to show you, because this was, Lindsey Graham being Lindsey Graham last night, but it's important to put because this is what is going out on American television on one of the most popular shows on cable network, the Sean Hannity show. I'm just going to play this and let him talk for himself. Watch this.
You know, I've been going all over South Carolina like most people. I hadn't slept much. But look what's going on in Israel. Our friends in Israel are surrounded by people that want to kill them, destroy them, a second Holocaust in the making. And Biden says be proportional. What is the proportional response to people who want to kill you and your family? They're running out of ammunition in Israel. We have to help our friends to keep the war over there from coming here.
I could not believe the last part. At first, I was just kind of rolling my eyes like Lindsey being Lindsey. He's always saying this nonsense and whatever, it's no point. But now he's taking it to a new level. Now it's like, oh my God, Iran is coming for us. We have to fight them over there so they don't fight them over here. I mean, I wonder if he even listens to himself. I wonder if he even thinks through the words that come out of his mouth of how irrational they are. Iran can't even project power beyond its borders. They don't even have a conventional threat against Israel at all. The only thing they can do is their long-range missile force to retaliate. But you can't fight a war. You can't win a war with just missiles. You can defend yourself. And that's what Iran has set itself up to do. Other than being a nuisance with some of these militia groups that they set in the area, and without question they do, and they have done terrorist acts, and there's no question that they have done those things. But in terms of the geopolitical issue and the balance of power in the region, they're balanced, way balanced out by all the regimes, the Arab regimes in the area. They always have been. There's never been a need for the U.S. to go and fight a war with Iran ever. There's no need whatsoever because they are self-contained. All they can do is strike out, but they can defend themselves. They do have the capacity to defend themselves. And to now say that they're coming for us and we have to, help Israel defeat them militarily because otherwise we're at risk is just insane. And there's no nicer way to put it. There's a lot of other more accurate ways I could put it, but I won't be rude on the air. But we just need to make sure that is just complete and utter nonsense. And you see how emphatic he was before that. But we need to resist those kinds of things. We need to stick with something that's rational and logical. And frankly, if I'm listening to anybody, I'm listening to that Arab League right now because what they're talking about is peace. They're talking about ending the conflict. They're talking about finding a negotiated settlement by which everyone gets a chance to live in stability and in security. That's what we should be doing. You want to talk about American leadership? That's where it should be going. We should be facilitating and encouraging that movement, not one that seeks to expand the war and wonder if we're going to get in it or not. That's your deep dive for today, folks. Thank you for listening today. Really appreciate it. Here in not much longer, another 20 minutes or so, we got a great show for you. Very, very interesting. I'm super excited about this one. Professor Ted Postal from MIT is going to be back. He's going to be talking about what we've seen in the latest missile barrage with the Israeli Iron Dome, the sling, the arrow system, etc., all the air defense capacity of Israel. Is it as good as advertised? Are there weaknesses in it? And what did we learn from this last Iranian barrage? You're not going to want to miss this because it has a lot of implications for what could come next. Thanks very much, and we'll see you on that episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.